There are men who are born into the world already carrying chains, not around their wrists, but around their lives. And then there are men who, no matter how many walls you build around them, no matter how deep you bury them in darkness, refuse to stop breathing for the one thing that makes them human: freedom. This is the story of one such man. A man the world tried to erase. A man the ocean tried to swallow. A man who, after everything, still rose. His name was Papillon. And the night we first meet him, he moves through the shadows of a wealthy man's mansion like a ghost, precise, fearless, untouchable. He cracks open a vault with practiced ease and walks away with a fortune in diamonds, slipping out through a window as if the whole city belonged to him. He arrives at a gleaming club moments later, diamonds in hand, completely in his element. But the moment he steps inside, the atmosphere shifts. His boss, a powerful, well-connected man who has kept Papillon out of prison more times than anyone could count, is beating another man with the kind of quiet rage that only truly dangerous people possess. The arrangement between Papillon and his boss had always been simple. Half of everything stolen went upward, and in return, the law looked the other way. It was an ugly deal, but it had worked. Until now. As Papillon approaches, his boss turns to him with cold eyes and asks what he has brought tonight. Papillon scatters the stolen diamonds across the table, every last one of them. The boss's face softens with greed. Then, almost playfully, he asks if Papillon kept anything for himself. Papillon smiles and jokes that he saved the biggest ones. The boss laughs. But behind those eyes, something calculates. He immediately sends a spy to follow Papillon, because men like him never truly laugh. That decision becomes Papillon's undoing. He goes straight to his girlfriend, Net, and slips a diamond necklace around her throat, proof that the joke had been the truth. The spy sees everything. By morning, Papillon is arrested, not for theft, but for murder. The man his boss had beaten that night in the club had died. And the killing had been pinned on Papillon with the precision of a man who had done this before. He shouts his innocence to empty walls. No one listens. The judge delivers a life sentence without blinking. Net comes to the prison with tears streaming down her face and promises to fight through the courts. But Papillon has already made his calculations. His boss owns the judges. He owns the officers. The law in this world is not a shield. It is a weapon held by the wrong hands. There is only one path forward, and it does not go through any courtroom. It goes through the walls. That very evening, a fellow prisoner named Juliet approaches him with quiet eyes and tells him escaping is possible, but it requires money, and a great deal of it. Before a plan can form, the prisoners are loaded onto a ship bound for a brutal island prison in the middle of the sea, a fortress surrounded by jungle on one side and ocean on the other. On that ship, Papillon spots a man named Louis. Quiet, educated, wealthy, and completely vulnerable. Juliet warns him that the violent prisoners on board will gut Louis for his hidden money within days. Papillon sees opportunity and approaches Louis with a direct offer: bodyguard services in exchange for funding an escape. Louis politely declines. He trusts the guards. He trusts the system. He trusts his wife, who has promised to send a lawyer and have him freed through legal channels. Papillon says nothing more. He simply waits for reality to arrive. It arrives that same night. In the darkness below deck, a massive prisoner slides a blade across the throat of the man sleeping beside Louis, empties his pockets, and tosses coins to a guard who pockets them without pause. Louis lies absolutely still, his certainty shattered, his breath barely controlled. By morning, he finds Papillon and agrees to everything. He will fund the escape. He does not want to run himself. His wife will handle his release legally. Papillon shakes his head slowly and says nothing. But his expression says everything. The ship docks, and the prisoners are marched in chains toward the island that will become their world. The warden greets them in a wide courtyard with a speech that is half welcome and half warning. He tells them the jungle will kill them with thirst before any guard has to fire a shot. He tells them the ocean surrounding the island is patrolled by something far less forgiving than his soldiers. The sharks never miss. He announces the punishments with ceremonial precision: A first escape attempt earns 2 years in solitary confinement, complete isolation, total darkness. A second attempt earns 5. An attack on a guard earns death. The prisoners stand in silence. Papillon stands with his eyes open, counting exits. Prison life inside the island is brutal in ways that go beyond physical punishment. The men are crowded into cells together, and violence simmers constantly beneath the surface. Papillon watches over Louis the way a hawk watches a field, always calculating, always positioned between his friend and the danger that circles him. Then one afternoon at the quarry, Louis drops his hidden money in the dirt. He is pale with panic. Papillon moves without hesitation, searching the ground quietly and efficiently, then presses every note back into Louis's hands. Every single one. Louis stares at him for a long moment, visibly moved, and says he never expected to see that money returned. It is the first time trust between them becomes something unbreakable. The real fracture comes when a prisoner Papillon knew from the early days, his friend Juliet, makes a desperate run for the jungle. He almost makes it, but he kills a guard in the attempt, and the warden brings him back in chains. In front of every prisoner in the yard, without hesitation, the warden orders Juliet's execution. A heavy blade, a single motion, and it is done. The yard goes completely silent. Papillon's face does not move, but something inside him hardens into iron. As punishment for an unrelated confrontation, Papillon is ordered to carry Juliet's body into the jungle with Louis beside him. On that march, with a guard watching behind them, a chance appears. A pimp who runs women to the prison officers passes by in a cart stuck in the mud. Papillon leans close and quietly offers the man $2,000 to smuggle him off the island. When the pimp almost laughs, Papillon doubles the offer. The pimp's laughter stops. A deal is struck. 3 days, the other side of the island, a hidden boat. When the moment comes, Papillon moves. He knocks a guard unconscious during a body disposal task and runs into the jungle with everything he has. Guards pour in from every direction, firing blindly into the trees. He finds the river, dives in, lets the current carry him to the far shore, and climbs into the waiting boat, gasping, bleeding alive. But the pimp doesn't move the boat. He just looks at Papillon and asks for his $5,000. When Papillon admits he doesn't have the cash on him, the pimp laughs. And then the bushes around them erupt with armed guards. The pimp is not a smuggler. He is the warden's agent. He has always been the warden's agent. Every escaped prisoner he has ever lured to that beach has been handed back for double the reward. Papillon is dragged back to the prison in chains. The warden, almost amused, tells Papillon he is fortunate the guard survived the blow to his head. Then he has him thrown into solitary confinement. 2 years. Complete darkness. Not a single human voice. The cell is sealed. And this is where the story descends into something almost impossible to describe, because what happens to a man who is buried alive for 2 years is not merely physical suffering. It is the slow erasure of the self. Papillon eats boiled water that passes for food. His powerful body becomes architecture, ribs visible beneath skin, muscles gone, hands that once cracked vaults now trembling. He talks to the walls when the silence becomes too loud. One night, he tries to take his own life. The darkness wins for just a moment. Then a bucket arrives at the edge of his cell door. Inside it, a coconut and a small hidden note. He recognizes the handwriting immediately. Only one person in this entire prison would risk this for him. Louis. Papillon cradles that coconut in the dark like it is a living thing. He eats slowly. He starts doing exercises in the pitch-black cell, counting push-ups, measuring his existence in repetitions instead of days. Weeks later, the coconut is discovered by a different guard. The kind courier is executed on the spot, and the warden confronts Papillon directly, demanding the name of his source. Papillon says nothing. The rations are cut in half. The warden returns months later with warm soup as an offering in exchange for a name. Papillon takes the spoon, dips it into the bowl, and holds it toward the warden's mouth. The warden's face goes dark. He orders the last sliver of light sealed from the cell forever. But here is where the story turns, and it turns completely. When Papillon is finally dragged from solitary after 2 years, half dead and blinking against even the dim light of the hospital ward, Louis is waiting beside his bed. And when Papillon slowly begins to laugh, not the laugh of a broken man, but the quiet, sharp laugh of someone who has been thinking clearly the entire time, Louis understands. Papillon had never lost his mind. He had performed madness to survive it. Louis looks at his friend with something beyond admiration and says quietly that if their positions had been reversed, he would have broken. He would have given up the name. Papillon takes his hand and says that when his resolve nearly shattered, it was Louis's face that held it in place. They plan the second escape together. Papillon recruits a young prisoner named Sam whose friendship with a key-holding guard could open every necessary door. Louis, now trusted by the warden to manage sensitive documents, will drug the warden's drinks during a private film screening on a Sunday night. The pieces move precisely into position. On the night itself, everything works until the prison lights come back on at exactly the wrong moment. Louis, last to jump from the wall, loses his footing and crashes down onto sharp rock below. His leg shatters on impact. He cannot walk. Silly, the man who arranged the boat, tells them coldly that Louis is weight they cannot carry, that they should leave him. Papillon doesn't answer. He lifts Louis onto his shoulder and moves forward. They reach the boat. They push into the open sea. But the vessel is too small for 4 men, and water begins rising through the hull. Silly, drowning in his own panic, lunges for Louis with intent to throw him overboard. Papillon throws himself between them, but Silly is stronger, and his hands find Papillon's throat. Seconds before consciousness leaves him, Louis drives a knife deep into Silly's back. The 2 men lower the body into the sea. Louis stares at his hands in the dark, shaking. It is the first time he has ever killed anyone. Papillon pulls him close and tells him the truth. If he hadn't, they would both already be dead. Then the storm arrives. A wall of black water rises out of nowhere and swallows the boat whole. When Papillon opens his eyes, he is on a strange beach. They were found by indigenous villagers who treated their wounds with roots and herbs and asked nothing in return. A Christian nun finds him first, and when he asks about his companions, she smiles gently and says they are both resting inside. She knows what they are. She helps them anyway. Papillon walks to the water's edge and bathes. In the open sea for the first time in years, just breathing, just existing, unshackled, unnamed, no longer a number. But the peace ends when he spots police searching the jungle nearby. He races back to warn the others. But they are surrounded before they can move. Sam runs. The police shoot him without warning. Louis looks at Papillon through wet eyes and says he should not have come back. He should have run alone. The nun, they learn as the handcuffs close, is the one who reported them. Papillon is returned to the island prison. Second escape. 5 years in solitary this time. When he finally emerges, he looks like an old man. White hair, hollowed eyes, a body that time has carved down to its bare, stubborn core. He is transferred to a place called Devil's Island, the last prison, the worst one. A jagged rock rising from the ocean with no guards, no walls, only the sea itself as the warden. Prisoners left here simply deteriorate. Most of them go mad. The ones who don't spend their days staring at waves that have never once carried anyone to safety. But among the hollow-eyed men on that rock, Papillon finds a familiar face. Louis. Older, quieter, but alive. They hold each other for a long moment without speaking. Life on Devil's Island settles into a strange kind of rhythm, and then one evening, sitting at the cliff's edge watching the current, something shifts behind Papillon's eyes. He stands up. He starts moving. He tells Louis he has found the way out. Together they spend days gathering dry coconuts from the jungle, packing them into large sacks, binding the sacks into a raft. When it is ready, they carry it to the highest edge of the cliff and look down at the churning sea hundreds of feet below. And then Louis stops. He turns to Papillon with an expression that carries the full weight of everything they have survived together, and he says he cannot jump. He tells Papillon that there is nothing waiting for him on the other side of that water. His wife is gone. His money is gone. His former life no longer fits the man he has become. He is at peace here, in the only world that still makes sense to him. Papillon listens to every word. He doesn't argue. He doesn't push. He simply pulls his friend into a long, silent embrace, the kind that holds everything that cannot be said. And then he lets go. Papillon stands alone at the cliff's edge. He looks down at the waves and measures them, the way he has always measured every obstacle in his life. Louis stands behind him, watching. He has seen men jump from this cliff before. None of them survived. But he does not say a word to stop him, because he understands this man survived 7 years of darkness and still refused to stop dreaming of open sky. For a man like that, freedom is not a destination. It is the reason his heart is still beating. Papillon hurls the coconut raft over the edge first and watches it hit the water far below. Then he spreads his arms wide, faces the sky, and jumps. Louis rushes to the edge. He stares down into the churning water. Seconds pass. Silence. His heart sinks. Then, cutting through the sound of the waves, a voice rises from the water below, strong, laughing. Impossible. Papillon's voice. Alive. Louis looks down and sees his friend lying on the coconut raft, riding the current, already moving away from the rock, away from the darkness, towards something that has no name yet but is unmistakably free. Louis stands at the edge of Devil's Island, laughing and crying at once, waving with both arms until the figure on the water grows too small to see. Years later, an old man walks into a publisher's office in France and sits down. He places his hands on the desk and begins to speak. He tells his story from the beginning. Every prison, every guard, every blade of darkness, every friend he carried, and every friend he lost. When he finishes, the publisher is crying. The book that follows changes everything. The world reads what was done inside those walls, and the outcry that follows cannot be silenced. In 1970, a court finally overturns every charge ever brought against Henri Papillon. A man who was convicted of a murder he never committed walks out of history into the light, not as a fugitive, but as a free man. And as the screen fades, the film shows us a photograph of the real Henri Papillon, a reminder that this was not invented. This happened. A man lived this. And he refused, through every last moment of it, to disappear.